Welcome back to the Commodities Trade Institute podcast, your daily breakdown of the global commodity markets and the forces moving them. I'm Emily Costa. Today is Monday, April 27th, 2026. We are looking at a global market landscape that is being reshaped by a rare and punishing convergence of geopolitical conflict and extreme meteorological shifts. We are seeing the intersection of a worsening war in the Middle East and the emergence of what forecasters are calling the strongest El Niño in a decade, creating a dual threat environment for everything from food security to industrial manufacturing. We begin today in the fields and orchards, where the agricultural sector is bracing for a massive supply shock. For months, we have discussed the impact of the Iran war on fertilizer and fuel prices, but now we must add a significant climate variable to that equation. Weather bureaus from Japan to Switzerland are sounding the alarm on a strong El Niño pattern that is expected to dominate the Northern Hemisphere summer and persist through the end of the year. This isn't just a minor weather fluctuation. We are looking at sea surface temperature warming in the Pacific that could mirror the devastating events of 2015 and 2016. In Australia and India, the signs are appearing. Meteorologists are reporting that rainfall has been so sparse in parts of New South Wales and Queensland that the planting season for wheat and canola has essentially collapsed. Farmers there haven't seen decent rain in 3 or 4 months. When you combine that with the fact that moisture is low and the fuel and fertilizer needed to plant are becoming prohibitively expensive because of the Middle East blockade, you see a vicious cycle forming. If the fertilizer is too expensive and the rain isn't coming, farmers simply won't plant, compounding the eventual yield loss. In India, the monsoon is expected to be below average for the first time in 3 years, potentially bringing only 70 to 90% of the long-term average rainfall. This threatens the summer crops of rice, cotton and soybeans, while also drying out the soil for winter wheat. Even in Europe, the agricultural outlook is shifting. We are tracking a significant move away from maize. Forecasters expect the European Union's grain maize area to slip below 8 million hectares this year for the first time this century. Maize is an incredibly fertilizer-intensive crop, and it requires significant energy for drying after the harvest. With the war in the Middle East sending energy and petrochemical costs soaring, many European farmers are opting for sunflower seeds or other oil seeds that offer better margins and lower input risks. It is a structural shift in land use driven by the hard reality of a wartime economy. Turning to the metals market, there is a distinct sense of a rebound in Europe, but it comes with a heavy dose of geopolitical realignment. European steelmakers are showing signs of an inflection point after several muted quarters. Hot-rolled coil prices have gained about 20% in the past 6 months, bolstered by higher energy prices and new European Union safeguards that have halved import quotas from outside the bloc. Ironically, while the war in the Middle East has created immense uncertainty, it has also made European steel more competitive relative to Asian peers. Producers in China and India are far more dependent on energy flows from the Middle East than their European counterparts, meaning the disruption at the Strait of Hormuz is actually regionalizing the steel market. At the same time, we are seeing a significant diplomatic push to secure the future of advanced manufacturing. On Friday, United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio and European Union Trade Commissioner Maros Sefcovic signed a memorandum of understanding to deepen cooperation on critical minerals. This is a direct effort to loosen China's grip on the materials essential for semiconductors, electric vehicles, and advanced weaponry. The plan involves exploring border-adjusted price floors and coordinated trade policies to protect domestic industries from what officials call non-market practices and economic coercion. It is a clear signal that the West is moving toward a preferential trade bloc for the minerals that will define the next decade of industrial competition. Of course, the shadow over all of this remains the conflict in the Middle East and the state of the world's most vital oil choke point. The situation at the Strait of Hormuz is becoming increasingly dire. In the past 24 hours, only 5 ships passed through the waterway. To put that in perspective, the average daily volume before the war began on February 28th was 140 ships. The recent seizure of 2 container ships by Iran has effectively paralyzed commercial traffic. Shipping companies are now waiting for a stable ceasefire and ironclad security assurances before they will risk their vessels and crews. For now, traffic is restricted to very narrow routes near Oman and Iran that simply cannot handle normal global volumes. In response to these soaring costs and supply disruptions, the White House has taken action. President Trump has granted a 90-day extension to the Jones Act waiver, which allows foreign-flagged vessels to move oil, fuel, and fertilizer between United States ports. This extension will now run through mid-August. It's a move clearly designed to dampen fuel price spikes ahead of the November midterm elections, as rising gasoline prices continue to weigh heavily on public sentiment and economic approval ratings. While domestic shipbuilders and unions have criticized the move as an affront to American maritime dominance, the administration is prioritizing immediate economic stability and the movement of critical commodities during this global energy shock. The energy crisis is also being felt deeply in the natural gas markets. The International Energy Agency released a sobering report on Friday, suggesting that the Middle East conflict could result in a cumulative loss of 120 billion cubic meters of liquefied natural gas supply between 2026 and 2030. That represents about 15% of the expected global supply. Each month that the Strait of Hormuz remains closed results in a loss of roughly 10 billion cubic meters of supply from Qatar and the United Arab Emirates. Furthermore, damage to Qatari export facilities could take 4 years to repair, meaning this isn't free dip, it's a multi-year dent in the global supply chain. However, United States exporters have stepped into the breach with remarkable speed. So far this year, American facilities have loaded a record 32.15 million metric tons of liquefied natural gas, a 28% increase over the same period last year. This surge has almost exactly offset the drop in Qatari shipments. The Plaquemines terminal in Louisiana has been a standout, posting a 240% jump in volume. While this has provided a necessary lifeline for European buyers, who have taken 72% of those American exports, there are limits. These plants have been running at maximum capacity since January and will eventually need to shut down for maintenance, not to mention the looming threat of the Atlantic hurricane season. Finally, we look at the dry freight sector in South America, where some relief has finally arrived for the grain markets. In Argentina, truckers have ended a protest that had paralyzed the Quequén grain port, which handles about 20% of the country's soybean exports. The drivers secured a 16% freight rate increase to offset their rising costs. This protest had stalled exports worth approximately $450 million, so the normalization of activity is a welcome development for global soy supplies. Looking further ahead, the Rosario Grains Exchange is floating a proposal to eliminate agricultural export taxes entirely. Their analysis suggests that phasing out these duties could lift total output by over 10% by 2036, potentially adding over $6 billion in annual export revenue. It's a long-term play that could position Argentina to take even greater market share as other regions struggle with climate and conflict. It is a complex, interlocking web of challenges, but as always, the markets are finding ways to adapt, whether through new trade alliances, shifting crop choices, or record-breaking export surges. If you found this episode valuable, be sure to subscribe, share, and leave a review. Find us online at commoditiesinstitute.com.